we'll start with, how come it's not responding? Oh, I know.
Just down arrow.
Yeah, I know. So the overview, this talk begins with a brief review of last year's talk, kind of on aesthetics and civilization, and we focused on the aesthetics of life. And here you'll see this worked very well. And then manifestations of art, which reveals the modes of awareness. It's one of the modes that he uses. And I'm going to show a few slides and an observation of what shifts and sways the dynamics of civilizational mutations, these shifts from one to the other. And I'm going to integrate a bit some of what people this morning have talked about. You'll see how it fits in.
Good.
So art is what is happening, and I often talk about that presencing is the happening with the happening, right? And for me, it's also, as you'll see for Gebser, it comes down to Zen, being here and now, being just talking, just thinking, just feeling. So how is it that the structures are ever present? Not beside each other, right? But integrated, or in the stew of integration. And this is a metaphor, an analogy that I've worked with for a few years now. That the way all the modes of consciousness come together is like a stew. And I found that in Tao, in the Tao too, there's a story about the chef, the cook. So the conference theme, then I'll touch on that a little bit and have a surprise maybe. The role of duality and polarity and mutational dynamics. The dance of the sacred, we'll touch on that too. So from aesthetics of art as a manifestation, and that's very important in Gebser, that what we're looking at is manifestations of these modalities, of these mutations. And what is a mutation? What does Gebser mean by mutation? What reveals the shape or the structure of what is manifested? And how? How are the mutations manifested? And this is difficult, believe me. This is heavy thinking, and I appreciate all of the rest of your talks this morning, because some of it really fills in here. So what is with the integrating, the ever-present consciousness, the happening of mutation, or the mutational happening? That will be the next point. And finally, what does it mean to achieve integral illumination? And that for Gebser, as we'll see in some of the latest translations by Aaron Cheek, who we must thank for a lot of good work bringing Gebser's work to the English language. So what does it mean to achieve illumination as an expression of the newest mutation? And what does the dawn of everything suggest about the integral mutation? And that's a book I read a couple of years ago that really got me rethinking Gebser. The dawn of everything begins with the Native American worldview and builds on it. And he suggests that we keep trying, like here we're trying to get into the integral, we're trying to be totally saturated with the integral, but it's over and over again, and he shows that with the mythic and the mental, that they take time, and you know, there's like an effort to achieve those, and then it falls away, and we go back and start over again. So a lot to deal with here. This was the last year, Nietzsche's aesthetic life and Gebser's daily life. I've read a lot of Nietzsche, and I saw the similarities. One divergence in the history of aesthetics was Nietzsche, who found significance in an aesthetic life. He was inspired by the Greeks. He sought to live in beauty, transforming agony and drudgery into something creative and enrapturing. And that was in a book I read on hiking with Nietzsche. he sought a constructive way of living with the eternal return. I don't want to go into that a lot, but the eternal return was, I think, for Nietzsche, a way of making decisions. If you had to live with your decision over and over and over for infinity, what would you do? What decision would you make? For Gebser, it was the aesthetic of daily life, about the new consciousness that will not be fully valid as long as it is not lived in daily life. And further, it will happen of its own accord, and each individual's attitude and mode of behavior can ensure its process is successful. And this you'll see is a major theme of Gebser too. So, can you read the bottom line?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So everyone can achieve the whole with the awaring of origin. And for Gebser, that is the creative well that we draw from. And this includes the supersession of the ego, the realizing of time freedom. Some standard things there. Art is a manifestation of structures. This is one of the earliest cave paintings. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but again, these are the manifestations of artists. They reveal the modes of awareness. And slides of art are an observation of what shifts and sways the dynamics of civilizational mutations. This is Utah, Native American. I have some others, and New Mexico is just littered with rock art. You don't have to go into Gebser's cave to find these. All right. And this one, the second one, is from the Amazon jungle back at the Ice Age, about 13,000, 15,000 years ago. And then an Egyptian mural. So we're moving from tribal, right, magical, moving into mythic, and here we have the human form as integral to the mythic, if we can talk about that. And then a Roman mural, flat, right? But they did statues too. But what happens here is that with Da Vinci, I don't know if you can see that there's like a perspective built into the picture. And so this is already into the mental. And this to me is the height of the mental. I mean, she's looking at you and saying, huh? Huh? What are you guys up to? And finally, this is Alex, and that's my grandson. And this was at 2 years old. And I think that gives us a connection to reincarnation, because this is a very deep soul already at 2 years old. And then modern art, Kandinsky and Picasso, where we begin to, for Gebser, move into the integral awareness. And I won't talk much about that, except that I love the coloration. Color becomes a major intensifier of the integral. And one final one, and this is a current piece of art from the Rhode Island School of Design, very current. And you can see, again, color, intensification, as Gebser would talk about it, is very important. So art is an observation of what shifts and sways the dynamics of civilization mutations. It's what's happening, what is manifested, what is the shape, the pattern, and the mode is what we're going to try to work on. The ever-present stew of consciousness. How is it that the structures are ever present, not beside each other, but integrated, or in the stew of integration, maybe a melange, which is a mixture often of incongruous elements. And I think we often are dealing today with very incongruous elements, and the integral is working very hard to bring them together. And the conference theme, the role of duality and polarity in mutational dynamics, the dance of the sacred. Let me see. Yeah, so for me, the answer is integral to Gebser's project, that the dance is both polar and dual.
Yes.
The stew of consciousness, all are ever present, including collective unconscious, or as Merleau-Ponty would say, the less conscious. If it were totally unconscious, we'd have no awareness of it. So it's got to be some consciousness there. But duality differs. This is Gebser. Duality differs in one essential respect from polarity. In polarity, correspondences are valid, and this brings together what we were talking about this morning. Every correspondence is a complement, a completion of the whole. Duality is the mental splitting and tearing apart of polarity, and from the correspondences of polarity, duality abstracts and quantifies the opposites, or antitheses. From duality, only a deficient, because unstable form of unity can be realized as the unification of opposites in a third aspect. And I'll come back to that later, toward the end. So, for example, the ever-present magical. This is Hansi Freinacht, political philosopher, historian and sociologist. He talks about the listening society, and that caught my attention because my other major focus is receptivity, listening, and listening is dialogical in the sense that dialogical is dia through, but there is an ancient meaning of logic, of logos, that is the bringing together, the coherence, right? So listening gathers, and that caught my attention. So meta is a contemporary theme, and meta in general is a new theoretical, really. Meta is already like there's something above, right? Something above all this that somehow puts it together. But I think as the author here, I've come to believe that making the universe our home is about a very subtle but brutally honest introspection. It's about seeing how the tribal, the animus, the indigenous element lives within us. It's about noticing what is already there, what was there all along. It was our home for tens of thousands of years, and for many of us, since about 10 millennia. It faded into the background of our awareness. And you can see the bottom, not totally, there's still 250,000 hunter-gatherers in the world. It hasn't left us, right? Freinacht writes, these structures can only emerge in and through one another. Thus, any one structure is never truly left behind. And there's the website if you want to look at it. He explores how we could be more aware and integrate the magical into our modern lives. The point is the structures are already presencing, all active in some manner and some intensity. However, we're not aware of the processing of all the structures. And that gets very deep and very heavy. All of the consciousness structures are present. Eric Kramer, who was a longtime Gebser scholar too, studying Lucullus, says that the mythic is predominant. But I don't think that's right. The mythic is important in very, storytelling. The storyteller is very important, especially in modern culture, and in many ways integrates things, what's going on, but it is not the only thing and it's not predominant. Everything is there. Even if today the storytelling is influenced and swayed by the mental that we're also swimming in. So in The Invisible Origin, Gebser wrote, thanks to the integral consciousness structure, all structures constituting us, the mental, mythical, magical, down to the archaic, are becoming transparent to us, and hence integratable. So that's the dynamic that some of you were talking about too, is that transparency, the bringing to awareness, allows something to be integrated, right? So mutation, this is just a little shoring things up from the aesthetics of art as manifestation to dynamics of mutation. We have to ask, what is mutation? What does Gebser mean by mutation? What reveals the shape structure of what is manifested and how? Gebser suggests consciousness moves in its own ways, evolving, but not in a Darwinian sense, but evolving. This is me and some others that I read on Gebser, moving towards sensitivity and saturation, and I've used that word. Intensity doesn't quite give enough meaning to the integral, right, to that illumination. But saturation is like in the stew. The integral is here and there, and it saturates more in some places, like right here. This is a saturation point, right? But also from evolving, from the Latin word evolvere, means to unroll. Like things are are kind of coming out without going anywhere, to mature or spread. So you can see there's more of a sense there. And second, how we perceive and sense the receptivity of the artist who is in tune with the transforming world. How we perceive and sense. The artist is the one who can listen and attend to the world, who can resonate with the processes of the cosmic world, and allow the intertwining to create. I don't know what's going on here. The world has been shaken by my talk. Let's see where we're here. So the artist, the one who can listen and attend to the world, can resonate with the process. And resonate, again, very important. And you were talking about that this morning too, Jesse, that resonation. So then we perceive the artwork of creative individuals, the expression, but also of the world in general, and we process what we perceive and act on it. And the artist taps into the origin, right? The origin of politics, the origin of love. So this is the first paper I published in the journal, the Gebser Journal. It was about Gebser's project. And we have to understand that the challenges that motivated him at the time, World War I, World War II, the atomic bomb, the global catastrophe, which keeps coming up. We must soberly face the fact that only a few decades separate us from that event. The span of time is determined by an increase in technological feasibility inversely proportional to man's sense of responsibility. That is, unless a new factor were to emerge which would efficiently overcome this menacing correlation. I think I screwed that, but that's okay. The other aspect is that Gebser makes a clear argument that the emergence of a new awareness is a mutation, not a defined effect of some cause. The mutation is a new awareness, and as Sri Aurobindo would say, rearranges all the modes of consciousness that came before and are ever present in the integral present. So the structures here are melange, and I don't know what I meant about ideologies, so we'll skip that for now. Consider the spirit, the spiral, the time arrow, evolution, development, cycles like the yugas, the Mexican calendar, eras, astrological patterns, generation notes, notions of ages, golden and iron. Each of these is ever present now, right? So I don't want to go into a lot of detail here, but say the cycles, like the yugas, the cycles are still here, right? They're not predominant, but in some places they're very strong. We feel the cycles. And I'm going to read from this book a little bit. I don't know if you know this one, Feuerstein and his wife published it, Voices of the Threshold of Tomorrow, and it's 150 conscious people working in therapy and in science. There's a whole chapter on love, and those that are talking about love as the need of the day. So I've got 5 or 10 left to read, but this could have been written today. Major concerns were like the environment and what we're doing to the environment and how we're apart from nature and all that. And the positive side really ties very much into Gebser, is that what we need is illumination, right, the light. And then this was something that came up in the last week or two. We blame our troubles on a paradigm shift. So we shouldn't see these structures as a major problem. All of the structures have a deficient mode, right? And I think we say too much today. Well, it's because we're too mental, right? Of course we're mental. We're at that stage of consciousness. So new or at least novel events do occur. And one of these was a new book called Flukes. And I'll just give one story from it, and that is the president and council at the end of World War II were sitting around deciding where to drop the bombs. And the Secretary of State said, no, you're not going to drop them on Kyoto. No way. My wife and I were there before the war, and that is a beautiful town, right? And so little things like that, just visited for a few hours, and that changed who got bombed. So all are to some degree dimensions of the stew of the ever-present structures, perhaps the inevitable one-way cascade generated by agriculture. I think this is from an essay, Aeon, again about earlier cultures. So the cascade generated by agriculture is neither inevitable nor one way. Perhaps settled agriculture was not always the more desirable route to progress. And this movement has allowed small bands of hunter-gatherers to forge large, complex societies across continents. Despite what traditional models of human evolution suggest, settled agriculture is not a checkpoint on a one-way road to progress. And this, again, what I was talking about earlier, is that we didn't just go progress from hunter-gatherers to agriculture. It was back and forth. There was a major tribe in California that were agricultural for generations. And then they just picked up and went hunter-gatherer, right? Off they went. So mutation. I didn't tell people last year, but I got the Kindle book of Gebser, and I was able to do a lot of kind of searches, like, well, I don't want to say, but last year it was 120 that I were looking at. There were 420 counts of the word mutation in the ever-present origin. I examined at least 300, right? And I boiled it down for you. So mutation is the capacity of man to be the agent of the mutational event. As we have seen, this capacity is creativity. Gebser saw each phase of the awakening process. Oh no, that's not Gebser. This is Aaron Cheek. Gebser saw each phase of the awakening process as a radical effectuation of latencies hidden within the primordial ontology, which rendered itself present through discontinuous leaps or mutations of origin. And origin literally means primordial leap. And then Teilhard de Chardin is mentioned in respect to consciousness mutations, and indebted to the teleological principle of evolution, ultimately takes recourse to the concept of discontinuous occurrence. So Teilhard de Chardin had this progress kind of notion, evolutionary notion, but Gebser says he also had a concept of discontinuous occurrence, that mutations don't happen because of say, a cause. Mutation, that is, mutation to explains the decisive events. I'm getting a little tired, but we're almost done here. So the mutation becomes gradually visible over centuries. The mutation will enter general awareness at the moment of the deficient attitude, and when it reaches maximum chaos. So chaos is one of the factors for mutation. And this reality and actuality of the world, time making its presence known at the moment, that spatiality has been realized. So when spatiality is fully present and realized with perspective, and the first showings of perspective were in the theater, were in the backgrounds of theater. Although people put it in other places, but I think that was the earliest. So the reality and actuality of the world had to press toward mutation within man's consciousness. Chaos wasn't overcome until man accomplished an awakening, a further step in the awakening consciousness. And mutation and our role, and for Gebser it is our role, our responsibility, leads to the need to awaken, to integrate all structures, concretion of the spiritual, not merely psychic and intellectual. For every grain of transparency that is realized by a single individual intensifies the spiritual power of humanity as a whole. And again, that's from Aaron Cheek's latest translation, chapter 13 of Gebser's book, The Orient Smiles Differently, something like that. Is that right? The Orient? Asia smiles differently. Yeah. So the dawn of everything that I mentioned, Wengrow and Graeber, is clear that what Gebser is revealing is not evolution. They document how history is not a straight development of hunter-gatherers, tribal communities, leading to agriculture and the mythic, and finally the rise of states and all that implies. There are a number of developments, but all indicate that progress is not our most important product, nor is history a progression of human ingenuity or intelligence. So exploring human history, we cannot really support a civil evolution. Civil here as the love, the love that we share in our communities. This is one of the items that Wilbur argues that fits. I don't agree with a lot of his work. I think some of his up from me, and I think he hadn't read much Gebser at that point. Maybe later his work is better. But on this point, he was right on. We have to turn to studies of anthropology and ethnography to get a sense of how the dawn of everything is not so much evolving as repeating some of the same patterns, and how the shift from the mythic or the implied inclusive magical to rational was a long and circuitous process that was far from a straight line or a history from one consciousness structure to the next. It was lost and found again and again. So mutation becomes visible over centuries. The mutation will enter general awareness at the moment the deficient attitude reaches a maximum. Is that what I didn't? Oh, I guess that's it. So the reality and actuality of the world had to press toward mutation within man's consciousness and all of its unsuspected abundance. We do not render its design, rather our consciousness must recover it. We decide, and these 9316, these are from the Kindle edition. They don't really have the typical designation, so we do not render its design, rather our consciousness must recover it. We decide to approach the new world reality, so we must take an attitude or a way of seeing and visioning, Kunna says, to achieve the integral. I don't like the vision part. dominant, but in a sense, if you think of envisioning as fuller, something fuller, it might make sense. So it is the capacity of man to be the agent of the mutational event. As we have seen, this capacity is creativity, and it is only too obvious that the new mutation is becoming manifest everywhere. That's what Gebser says. And I say, yeah, there's no guarantee. Hold on. The requisite discipline and necessary differentiations and nuancing, the struggle with a language inadequate for the new statement, tend to discourage the individual. So I think we all feel that, and then we need to go into ourselves and forgive ourselves and heal, right, as we were saying earlier. So finally, integrality as illumination. Within German culture, an integral mutation was most likely achieved by Meister Eckhart, who is still erroneously represented, this is Gebser, as a mystic. He attained a universal integration by obtaining the illumination that super-awareness realized. Every so often by Zen Buddhism, not by a mystical submersion in a unio mystica. Gebser says he superseded the mental. And he lived in 1260 to 1380. This is one of the things that blew my mind and made me go back to this theme and work this. And in Aaron Cheek's translation of Gebser, we find even earlier in Homologies, a spiritual attitude, quoting the first lecture of Timothy, Paul the Apostle refers to the transcendent or supramundane characters of this life when he says God lives in an inapproachable life. So one wonders if one can find the luminous of the integral in other eras, or we must just say or recognize that this is serendipity and atemporal. So one more, I think, or two. So where does that lead us? Is the integral ever present? Is there an acausal, atemporal, time-free something going on here? One could possibly speak of it as the transluminous of the whole, this complete assimilation into transparency. And that's Cheek, again, writing about Gebser. I think that was from his biography of Gebser. Or perhaps keeping with the theme of the conference, we could go with Gebser and EPO. In this, I had read an article on Faust, right? And how people give up a lot of things, their spirituality, their life for money, for whatever. And I had read that article and I said, I got to put it there, leave it there. There's something there. And then about 2 weeks ago, I did a search in the Kindle for Faust, and there's 12 references to him, and this was one of them. So when Gebser says, when we recall the closing words of Faust, the eternal feminine draws us ever onward. And so we end, which is just the beginning. So I don't know how long I went, but...
Yeah, you're fine. That's good. We have 10. Yeah, thank you. Oh, this is not on.
Any questions?
I turned it off.
I meant to read a couple of quotations from here too about feminism, the feminine, but they didn't get in. This will be there if you want to look at it.
Yeah, hold on.
You mentioned Meister Eckhart, being
Hang on, let's get you, so the recording picks it up.
Okay.
Oh, okay, and I should stay up here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you mentioned about Meister Eckhart, and I remember seeing that in the Ever-Present Origin, that the Gebser felt that he was one of the few that had actually surpassed mental consciousness, or however it was that you phrased it. And I love that idea that the integral just is, magical and mythical and everything live with us now, that the integral has always been here, and that there were certain people that were able to live it. I mean, not to necessarily talk about it, or maybe they did talk about it, but to actually live it. And I was wondering in your experience in reading, etc., if there's anyone else like that that comes to mind for you that might qualify in such a way.
Well, I did, a lot of things I didn't get to say, but one was in reading Gebser's later work, he seems to favor Suzuki and Zen Buddhism. And for me, that has always been the path, or one path anyway, but the thing that grounds me, that I'm just here, that I'm here and now, and this is happening, and I love you all. Yeah.
It's interesting that that's like that's a kind of a community, a participatory thing, not an individual, and which is also kind of what we're living now, like with this group of us now here.
Yeah. But when you consider that, it really blows your mind. Then you have to rethink Gebser. I'm sure I got that point on. Yeah.
For Lisa. Oh. Yeah. Did you? Yeah, oh, sorry. And then Cheryl.
Okay. So you quote, mutation becomes visible over centuries. Do you think that's speeding up now?
Huh?
Do you think that's speeding up now?
Which is?
The integral mutation. Do you think it's going to take us centuries, or do you think as many
No,
other
I think
thinkers-
we're still bouncing around. We're going to be bouncing around for a long time. That was one of the main things I was trying to get across. Is that a lot of the work in this field, people, assume that we're all, it's an integral world. It's here, or the golden age is coming in a few years, and and it's not so simple.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You got this stew, and we're in the stew, and we're helping to make the stew. And there are chunks of the rational here, and big swaths of deficient mythic, right? All kinds of mythic distortions going on.
Sherilyn has.
And so, that all kinds of mythic distortions, and so it's effectively the job of integral to help find the light in the mythic, right? And you deal with the deficiencies, right? Because all of these structures have light and shadow elements, or deficiencies and advantages. I don't know what would be the opposite.
Efficiencies.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah, and so, okay, so I'm coming from more of a spiral dynamics framework, and trying to observe the distinctions, and I think they're powerful. It's wonderful to sort of put those models next to each other and say what's the same and what's different and what can we learn from that. So that's kind of the perspective I'm bringing.
Yeah.
One question I've always had, and asking a person like you is a real privilege, because to say how universal are these structures of consciousness, not just, in the cosmic sense, right? As an astronomer and cosmologist.
Yep.
So we would say that beings from other worlds would sample these same structures of consciousness, that it's not peculiar to what we can see in human creativity, human expression on the planet Earth, as we here on this world interface with the universe, with the cosmos in our way. With the structures, if there were some other world, with conscious beings who could also realize some of this mental, especially, right? What do you imagine? Would it be the same? Is it that universal, these structures of consciousness, or is it peculiar to humanity's interface with the cosmos?
Say that last one again.
It are the structures of consciousness, right? But by any model, but let's take Gebserian, right? Do you believe? So that's a weird question. What do you think about the possibility that these structures go beyond our world, our planet, our species?
Well, yeah, you see that Gebser goes back to the individual and the transformation of the individual, right? You can't, there's no way, I mean, except through flukes, and you don't know what happens from flukes, right? Our paper I did a couple years ago on synchronicity is cosmic serendipity. Kind of things that happen, you know, those of us, all of you, I'm sure, are open to unique and creative kind of things, you know. You just know the world is serendipity.
So if an extraterrestrial, you know, if there's consciousness, whether there's certainly pervasive consciousness, I think, in the universe, so there are other life forms, there are other manifestations of the light of the cosmos, right?
Or you can say it because I don't know how to go there.
I
mean,
see,
I'm
yeah,
limited
no, that's
at a
okay,
point.
that's okay. No,
Yeah.
I know, I don't either. That's why I'm asking, because I don't know, you know, there certainly is a search for a life elsewhere that NASA is conducting, and, you know, if we were to sample that somehow, it seems very remote possibility given how grand the universe is. But it's interesting for me to ponder sometimes, not only the question of life elsewhere, but whether these structures of consciousness, given that the seeds of consciousness would be there in whatever origin of this universe, would they come out similarly, right? You know, and I don't know. So that's just a wondering. There's no clear answer, I'm sure, but I wonder if your wanderings intellectually have encountered a thought like that about how cosmically universal the structures of consciousness are beyond humanity's experience in the cosmos.
I don't know. I go back to two American Indian principles. Everything is alive and everything is connected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That good?